I'm Carol Hilliston. I'm the hike leader for the Brodhead Watershed Association. Delighted to be here at Cherry Valley, which is one of my favorite places to walk. There are an incredible number of native species of plants. Some of the native species that you'll find here at Cherry Valley are like cattails and willows, redbuds, dogwoods, all kinds of beautiful creatures. I remember what it was like when it was a golf course. And after it became a National Wildlife Refuge, and what Fish and Wildlife has done, along with the Friends of Cherry Valley, to take this all back to the way nature intended it. So instead of all these manicured fairways that are mowed right down to the creek with fertilizer and herbicide and pesticides, now there's, in summertime, native grasses like little blue stem and big blue stem. August, there's all kinds of milkweed surrounded by butterflies. As a watershed organization, what we care about is keeping water pure and safe. And all of those native plants are essential for keeping the water pure and safe. If you have fairway where instead of the water racing across the fairway and straight into the creek, carrying with it all kinds of contaminants, the native plants slow everything down and help the creek to stay healthy and cold.
My name is Michelle Riley, and I am the Development Associate with the Brodhead Watershed Association. The Brodhead Watershed Association's mission is to protect and preserve the water resources in the Brodhead Cherry Creek watersheds. We are standing along the Cherry Creek here in Cherry Valley National Wildlife Refuge. Part of our mission is to inspire public action and municipal action to protect our shared water resources. That includes planting native in your own gardens and on your own properties. Native plants are adapted to this local climate, have a deeper root structure that helps filter water to deeper levels of the soil. That means less work for gardeners and less water that you need to take care of these plants. You can find out more resources about planting native in your own gardens, whether that be shade or sun, what to plant where on our website at brodheadwatershed.org. Scroll down to a section called Plant Native. Native plants are available at local plant stores, so be on the lookout for that at your local nurseries, or available on our website during our annual native plant sale, which happens each and every spring.
Hi, my name is Alex Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of the Brodhead Watershed Association. Some of my favorite native plants are the buttonbush and the winterberry holly in particular because they are perfect for rain gardens. These particular species grow typically in bogs and swamps, and they thrive in wet soil conditions, and they also produce flowers later in the season, which benefits the native pollinators such as the bumblebees and the various species of Lepidoptera, which are the moths and butterflies. So the buttonbush and the winterberry holly are two of my favorites. I'm also very fond of the asters and the goldenrods, which provide very important late season nectar and pollen for species like the monarch butterfly. And they typically bloom from September into October. So you can't really go wrong with a goldenrod or an aster, and you really can't go wrong with a winterberry holly or a buttonbush. The winterberry holly is both female and male, and the females produce brilliant red berries which persist into the winter seasons, which is another reason that I particularly like those hollies. And it's one of our most vibrant native species, the winterberry holly, and it occurs a lot in the headwaters regions of the Brodhead Watershed. Benefits of the native species of flowering plants is that the local pollinators have evolved with these particular species over millions of years in this particular region. As the glaciers proceeded and receded, these species came and went with it, and a lot of the native pollinators have the specific tongue length that's required to pollinate certain species that non-native pollinators like the honeybees do not. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that when you plant a native flowering species, you benefit the native pollinators specifically. One of the most important things to keep in mind when you're planting a native pollinator garden with native pollinating species is that these species bloom at staggering intervals throughout the growing season. So one of the first species that blooms in this area is the redbud and the lowbush blueberry. And then at each couple of weeks, a new native species will bloom. So it's important to purchase plants that bloom at different times of the year. For example, the blueberries are an excellent May blooming species. The winterberry holly is a good June blooming species. The buttonbush is a good July and August blooming species. And then for September and October, you can plant asters and goldenrod. And that way the native pollinators have a consistent source of both pollen and nectar throughout the entire growing season. So as a customer, one thing that folks need to consider is the source of their plants that they're purchasing. From commercial retailers, sometimes the plants are treated with neonicotinoids, which is a pesticide which has a long duration in the local ecosystem. These neonicotinoids can last for months even after being applied, so when one purchases a plant, it can still be present on the leaves and the flowers, so that when the flowers, like for example, if a bud goes into bloom, the local species can then acquire the neonicotinoids and bring it back to their nest, and in what they call the bee bread, which then feeds for bees, it feeds the brood and can cause the developmental issues in the bees. So one does need to be cognizant of the source of where they're purchasing plants because of these new neonicotinoids.
Thank you to Friends of Cherry Valley for having the Brodhead Watershed Association as part of their Spring Fling event.